Seeing a play is a special event in any child's life, but what about the children that don't get to experience this kind of stuff? This is a direct quote from Dramatics magazine, their May issue of 2013. My job today is to try and persuade all of you to join a theater group of some kind, or at least be interested in theater. Some of the arguments that are made against joining theater are, there's never enough positions open, there's no colleges, I'm simply not good enough, or there's just never anything for me to do. All too common arguments, every one of them can be proven wrong. So, my job today is to prove to you that theater is for everyone. Let's start with the argument about there are never any positions open. It's an all too common tale. A person leaves an audition sad because they didn't make the cast and they think that there's nothing left for them to do for that play. What they don't realize is that the backstage crew almost always needs some extra help. According to Kappa.com, there's always a need for positions including assistant stage manager, box office manager, lighting design, sound design, crew, chorus, choreographer, playwright, director, stage manager, assistant stage manager, and many more. So with all these available positions, it's pretty impossible not to have something to do, and they're almost never filled. Because they're almost never filled, many members of the cast often have to double up on their part, learning audition play, learning their lines for the play, and then also building the set and doing all the other stuff that the backstage crew would usually have to do, thus giving them less time to learn their parts and lines in practice, and thus making the show worse than it could actually be. So now that we've settled that argument about there's never anything to do, let's move on to the next one. There aren't any colleges. That's wrong. There are many colleges, and they have their own name. They're called conservatories. They're purely acting colleges, and they're all over the country. One of the biggest ones is AMDA, or AMDA as it's called. It's the American Musical and Dramatic Academy. They are one of the biggest in the nation, and possibly one of the biggest in the world. And in one of their bulletins that they sent to me, they have a course description of what's known as their Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. It's a mix of musical theater, acting, dance theater, and performing arts. And you can even split it up into just one little section of each of those. You can do music theater or dance theater, or you can do a mix of both. So there's a lot of availability when it comes to colleges, and AMDA is not the only one. Now that we've settled the college dispute, on to the next one. I'm not a good enough actor. Well, there is one problem with that argument. There is no such thing as a bad actor. I'm going to explain. I had an interview with a friend of mine at a thespian conference back in January. His name is James Veith. We had a talk about this very thing as being a bad actor. There is no bad actor because every person has their own individual style of acting. My style, if anybody knows me, they know that I very rarely stick to the script, and I ad-lib a lot. But I focus very much on my motions and how I move when I'm on the stage. So I don't focus on so much what I'm saying, I focus more on how I'm saying it and how I'm presenting it, to give the audience a better visual. While my friend James, on the other hand, he sticks to the script to the last minute. He will have his script backstage with him, and he will be reading it right before he goes on. He focuses on everything of exactly how he should say it as his character would say it. And so everybody is different. Everybody has their own little mix of in-between. Everything's very individualized, is a good word for it. So now that that argument is settled and we prove there's no such thing as a bad actor, there is one more thing that often proves fatal to many people thinking about theater. It's a major problem, and people don't realize how easy it is to counteract it. One way to counteract it, and probably the easiest and most effective, is to realize that most of the time that you're not going to see many people that you know in an audience. Now, think about this for a minute. What are you more afraid of? An audience that is completely full of strangers that you will never ever see again, or an audience filled with people that you completely know and you will and probably see and talk to them every day? Probably the second one, right? If that's the case, both now know nothing about the script and they will never know if you actually messed up or not. With that being the case, it seems kind of a lot easier now, right? Now, with that being said, I had an interview with my theater coach, Mrs. Deanna Winkler. She talked to me about this very thing, and she actually gave a statistic of this kind of information. I'm not exactly sure where she got it, but this is her own experience of saying, when you're on a stage and you're looking out into the audience, odds are the chance of you seeing somebody that you actually know is less than 25%. And the bigger the audience, the less that number is. So yeah, you're just talking to a bunch of people that you're never going to see again, and they're never going to know if you're going to mess up or not. So now, stage fright. Not that big of a deal. Now that we've settled basically all the arguments that I can think of, I want you guys to take this information, think about theater a little more, and if the opportunity comes up, just go with it because it's a lot of fun. If you think about theater and you think about what you're going to do, you realize that the more you practice and the more you try, the better success you'll have at auditions, so you can get into the cast more often, and the more fun it is, and the more ways you can be an escape for people. Theater is a way for people to escape and be happy for just a little bit of time, just to escape the pressures of real world. So now take this information and just be ready to use it if you ever want to.